Hey, Ryan Hayden here. Update number 17. I've got a couple things to show you I'm pretty excited about, and I wanted to talk for a few minutes about my sermon. So tomorrow I'm going to do something I almost never do. In fact, I don't think I've ever done it before. I heard a sermon this week while I was away. Couldn't find the notes online. There was no other version of it that I could find online. I just heard it sitting in a service. So I scratched down some notes, and it was an amazing sermon. It was by Tyler Gillett, who pastors, I believe, the Worth Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Texas. He walked in my college graduation like two people ahead of mine because I was a G, he was a G, and I was an H. Anyways, I've known him a long time. But amazing sermon on Leah and Rachel, and the title of his sermon was The Beautiful Story of the Ugly Sister, and a lot of helpful things. And I'm about to start a series on Sunday morning going through the fruit of the Spirit and the fruit of the flesh, because we've come to that part in our study of Galatians. And I'm going to go away next week, so I didn't want to start and then go away. And I just feel like the Lord wants me to do this message tomorrow. So that's new. I've never done that before. I'm just going to take that outline and write it out. And I preached through Genesis and done a lot of study, and in fact read that passage in my devotions this week, so it should be interesting. Let me talk about how I write my messages out just for a second, and then I'll get into the Simple Church Tools sermons news here, because it kind of ties together. I write out a full manuscript of every sermon I preach. I didn't used to do that. When I was just preaching once or twice a month, as an assistant pastor, I would never write out my sermons. I would have maybe a scarce outline that I would go off of. But what I found is when I started preaching 3 times a week, doing Sunday school, for me, my brain just felt like a jumbled mess. And writing out a manuscript ensured that I never go into a pulpit without having a really clear idea of what I'm going to say, knowing that it's coherent, knowing that it's going to stick close to the Bible. And I don't know of a way to do that without writing a manuscript. I'm not downing people that don't do that. I'm just saying that's the way that I do it. And the way that I write manuscripts, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. A lot of people write them in Microsoft Word. Some people write them in Apple Pages. Several years ago, I had this idea that I wanted to someday have a sermon library, like an online sermon library where my manuscripts could be sortable. And so I started doing some research about what would be the best format to write in. And there's a format called Markdown. If you've never heard of it, just Google Markdown. It's very, very easy to learn and extremely helpful. And so I've used lots of different Markdown apps, and there's a bunch of them. There's probably 100 different Markdown apps to write my sermons, but the end result is it's just a plain text file. And so I was going through today preparing for a demo of the Simple Church sermons. I was going through preparing to send this to somebody who's going to enter all these sermons for us, because I've got a backlog of like a couple hundred sermons that's going to go on the Simple Church sermons, and I wanted to prepare that. And one of the things I wanted to do is fill in the sermon manuscripts into that database that didn't exist yet. And I just had them all in a folder, just a bunch of text files. So I can just send that folder to the Dropbox folder to the person that's going to be entering that, and it's going to work great. So right now the program that I'm using is for Mac only. So if you don't have a Windows computer, you can't use it, or if you have a Windows computer, you can't use this. It's called Bear, Bear. I think it's like $3 a month or something like that to use. And normally I'd be against that. I just love this app. It works fantastic on my iPad, which a lot of times I write my sermons on my iPad, and it syncs between my two computers. I have a MacBook that I use in my home office, which is honestly what I use about 90% of the time. And then I have a Mac Mini, which is my previous computer I keep in my church office. And the only thing I ever do on that computer is write messages. That's it. So sometimes I want to get away from all of this stuff, and I will just to study, and I'll spread things out at that desk in my church office, which is like 100 feet from here. and just I have that set up so that I can't open a bunch of websites, and I just use Bear and like Blue Letter Bible and have a bunch of books spread out, and that's how I write my messages. So just look into that markdown. I'll probably say a little bit more about that in the future. Super helpful. Okay, let me show you what we've got on the speaker or on the Simple Church sermons. We've done some work on this over the day, and so on the sermons we've implemented, and it doesn't look great. We're going to fix this, but we've implemented the Bible text so that you can now add multiple Bible texts, and those texts are searchable. So we're only going to go to the chapter level. This is just 2 Chronicles chapter 7. We're not going to implement verse. And I'll show you why in a second. But that's that. So on the actual sermon side, we have now, from the list of sermons, and this says by date, but eventually this is going to go to by scripture, and date's going to be something different. But now I think these two sermons, one of them I have is 2 Chronicles. So if I just click 2 Chronicles, boom, it's going to show that. The other one was Ecclesiastes, and so that changed. And another thing that we're working on changing here, kind of finishing this up, is this is going to be just showing the sermons and the chapters of sermons that exist. So this list should have two things in it, just Ecclesiastes and 2 Chronicles. And then the chapter would, be just one thing because there's only one of each. So that's one thing that we're working on, and I'm excited about that. Other thing that we've got some progress on here is actually the single speaker page. And so, we've got this page where the photo is going to show here, and then a list of all of the sermons by that speaker. And then underneath that, any series that speaker is contributing to. And so it's all sort of tied together, and it's really going to be really cool when it's done. And so there's some progress being made there. So that's the sermons updates. Pretty cool stuff. One other thing I wanted to show you real quick, let me open this up, is I had some ideas about the planner tool yesterday and I did some work to sort of implement that. I'm going to show you how it's going to work. One of the things I want for the planner tool is I want it to enable collaboration between people on your church that are doing planning out worship services. So like your pianist, your pastor, your song leader, all these different people. If you have a specialist and that kind of church soloist and whatnot. And so what I've done is I've added on our design, I've added this idea of contributors, and you'll be able to go in here and add contributors. And then you'll also be able to tell what that contributor does. So for instance, Harold Jansen is our song leader, but he also reads missions letters and he'll do announcements and that kind of stuff. And so under willing to do, all those options will be checked. Okay. And then on the actual app itself, let me find this in this giant mess of stuff here. Okay. So on the actual app itself, what we're going to do is we're going to have this little button that when you press, it pops down this search thing, and you can pick from appropriate contributors based on that option type. So if you have people that are willing to lead music, then those people are going to be shown here. If you have people that are specialists or that sing church specials or sing in some kind of group, and it's a special, then it'll show those names, and you'll be able to click on those. And then when you save this, what it's going to do is it's going to send both by text message and by email a read-only copy of this order of service to those people with a note that says, if there's a question, contact so-and-so. And so that way you can quickly do this. If you're working on this early in the week, you can quickly do this and then hit save, and it's going to send a copy to your pianist, to your church soloist, to anybody else who's involved in the service. They'll all have a copy of the order of service, and they'll all be on the same page. And so I was pretty excited about that. It's still in the early phases. Of course, this whole planner tool is still in the early phases, but I think it's going to be pretty helpful. So thanks for your comments, and thanks for your encouragement. One of the best things you can do is share this with your preacher friends. I'm hoping to have a really solid demo out by the end of the week, or by the middle of this next week, of the sermon tool. And when that's done, I'll be able to, I really think once there's a really solid working demo and I can show, hey, this thing works, I think a bunch of people are going to jump on the Kickstarter. At least that's my hope. And so if you could help me with that, that would be huge. Right now, I mean, every one of all this work that I'm showing is costing money, and there's no money coming in for Simple Church Tools. And so I am, playing kind of a little bit of a dangerous game here, just trying to stay ahead of these updates. I'm really hoping that a lot of people jump on this Kickstarter. And if you can help me, if you believe in what I'm doing, if you can help me by sharing this with your friends, not this video, but sharing this Kickstarter campaign with your friends and saying, hey, check out what this guy is doing, check out what they're doing, it's awesome. I sure would appreciate that. It's going to go a long way towards helping us get this thing off the ground. So thanks. It's my update for the day.